I sat in the dark, the pale glow of my computer screen casting eerie shadows on the walls. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears, louder even than the faint hum of static coming from my speakers. The video was playing again, on a loop as it had been for hours. I couldn't shut it off. The mouse didn't work, the keyboard was frozen, and pressing the power button on my PC did nothing. I wanted to look away. I needed to look away, but I couldn't. It felt like the screen had its own gravitational pull, locking my gaze to the distorted images flashing before me. The room felt heavier with every passing second, the air thick and oppressive, like something unseen was pressing down on me. And then I felt it, that prickling sensation at the back of my neck. I wasn't alone. I didn't dare turn around. The video flickered, and the distorted shapes on the screen seemed to shift. Impossible shapes, moving in ways that made my stomach churn. Then the screen went black, leaving me staring at my own terrified reflection in the monitor. A single line of text appeared, bright and sharp against the darkness. "You shouldn't have watched." I wish I could say this all started with an innocent mistake, but that would be a lie. The truth is, I went looking for trouble, and I found it. I've always been curious about everything, and for years, the dark web had fascinated me. Not because I wanted to buy drugs or hack into government servers, I wasn't into any of that. It was the mystery that pulled me in. Everyone says it's where the internet's darkest secrets are hidden, and I wanted to see for myself. Most people would have left it at that, right? Just a passing curiosity, but I've never been great at letting things go. I started watching videos about the dark web, people sharing their experiences, the stuff they claimed to have seen. Most of it sounded fake, like bad horror movie plots or urban legends. But a few stories stuck with me. They talked about cursed files, cryptic videos, and things that seemed to follow people after they'd clicked on the wrong link. It all sounded so ridiculous, but at the same time, what if it wasn't? That what if haunted me. It made me wonder what was really out there. I convinced myself it was harmless. I wasn't planning to do anything illegal, I just wanted to explore. I wanted to see the places everyone else was too scared to look at. So I set up everything I needed. I downloaded Tor, signed up for a VPN, and followed all the guides on how to stay anonymous. I wasn't just being cautious, I was excited. It felt like I was unlocking some forbidden door, and my fingers practically trembled as I typed in my first .onion address. At first, it was nothing like I'd imagined. No creepy music or flashing red warnings, just plain, boring websites, dead forums, outdated marketplaces, and scams everywhere. It felt like a sketchy version of Craigslist, not some sinister underworld. But then I found it, a forum that didn't look like much at first. Plain black text on a white background, with threads organized like a 90s message board. Most of the topics were the same old dark web cliches, people asking for stolen credit cards, trading codes, or swapping tips about staying anonymous. But one thread caught my eye. It was titled, "Watch What Shouldn't Be Seen." I almost didn't click on it, but the title stuck with me, and after a few minutes, curiosity got the better of me. The thread was filled with hundreds of replies, mostly people arguing or sharing cryptic warnings. The original post was short, just a single sentence. "If you're curious, go ahead. But don't say I didn't warn you." Underneath was a link. I stared at it for what felt like forever, the little voice in the back of my mind screaming at me to close the tab and forget I'd ever seen it. But the other part of me, the part that always wants to know, whispered, "It's just a video. What's the worst that could happen?" I clicked the link. I wish I could go back and undo that choice. I wish I'd listened to the warnings or to my own better judgment. But I didn't. I watched the video. And now, it's watching me. The process of diving into the dark web was like stepping onto a hidden path, one where every step felt riskier than the last. I knew it wasn't safe. I wasn't naive. but something about the mystery of it all kept pulling me in. I wasn't looking to buy drugs or weapons or anything illegal. I just wanted to explore, to see the parts of the internet that people whispered about but didn't dare visit. I started with the basics, downloading Tor and setting up a VPN. I followed every guide I could find to make sure I was anonymous. No real names, no traceable details, and certainly no clicking on suspicious links. It felt like setting up for some grand adventure, but in reality I was just sitting in my dark apartment, headphones on, lit only by the glow of my computer. When I opened Tor for the first time, it wasn't what I expected. There was no eerie music, no flashing warnings. It just looked normal, like the internet's older, uglier cousin. There were forums, directories, and marketplaces. Most of the sites I visited were either dead links or basic forums with outdated posts. For a while, it was underwhelming. I thought to myself, is this it? But the deeper I went, the more unsettling it became. A few links led to places I didn't want to linger, users posting cryptic requests, offering services that made my stomach turn. The conversations were written in a way that felt alien, full of codes and abbreviations I didn't understand. Still, it wasn't enough to scare me off. That's when I found the forum. It wasn't flashy, just a plain site with a long list of threads. Most of the posts were what you'd expect, people discussing hacking techniques, illegal trades, and the usual dark web topics. But one thread stood out from the rest. The title was simple: Watch What Shouldn't Be Seen. I clicked on it without thinking, like my curiosity was moving faster than my logic. The original post was short: Curiosity kills, but if you're ready to see something you can't unsee, follow the link. Just know, this video chooses you, not the other way around. The replies were all over the place. Some people were laughing it off, calling it a joke. Others were warning everyone to stay far, far away. A few shared vague stories about how the video had changed them, but no one explained how or why. The more I read, the more I wanted to see it for myself. At the bottom of the post was a single link. I hesitated. My hand hovered over the mouse, but my curiosity kept winning the internal fight. It was just a video, I told myself. What harm could it do? I clicked. The link took me to a basic file sharing site. It didn't look unusual at first, but the titles of the files immediately made my skin crawl. Do not open .mp4. Final warning, Avi. It knows you. Move. The thumbnails were mostly static or pitch black, but one or two showed distorted images, blurry shapes or faces that didn't look quite human. And then I saw it. One file was named for you.mp4. It felt like it was mocking me, like it knew I would find it. Next to the title was a note. This video chooses its viewer. If you're here, it's because it wants you to be. I stared at it for what felt like forever. Every part of me was screaming to close the page and forget about it, but my curiosity wouldn't let me. I rationalized it. It's just a video. It can't actually do anything to me. I clicked download. The file began to transfer to my computer, and I watched the progress bar inch forward. It was painfully slow, taking far longer than it should have. As I waited, a strange heaviness filled the room. The air felt different, thick and heavy, like someone was standing right behind me. I turned around quickly, but the room was empty. It was just me, my computer, and the quiet hum of my apartment. Still, the feeling didn't go away. When the download finally finished, the file sat on my desktop, its name bold and taunting: For you.mp4. My hands felt clammy as I moved the mouse over to it. My heart was pounding so loudly it was hard to think. I wanted to stop, but I also needed to know. I needed to see what was so special about this video. I double-clicked the file. As the screen flickered and the video started to play, I had this sinking feeling in my chest, like I'd just done something I could never undo. When I clicked the video, my screen flickered and went black for a moment. Static hissed through my headphones. not loud, but persistent, with a faint, almost imperceptible low hum underneath. It wasn't a normal hum either. It was the kind of sound you don't just hear. You feel it in your chest, like the vibrations were crawling under your skin. Then the video started. It opened on a room. At first glance, it was just a plain, dimly lit space, but something about it felt wrong. The walls were cracked and stained, the kind of decay that suggested it had been abandoned for years. A single bulb hung from the ceiling, swaying slightly, casting flickering light and deep, jagged shadows across the room. The camera didn't move. It was fixed as if mounted on a tripod, positioned at an angle that felt intentional, almost as though someone had set it up to record this space for a reason. Nothing happened at first. The room was empty, the flickering light the only movement. I leaned closer, trying to make sense of what I was looking at. That's when I noticed it. The shadows. They didn't move the way they should. The bulb was swaying gently, but the shadows didn't follow the same rhythm. They lagged behind, shifting almost like they had their own agenda. It was subtle, the kind of thing you could easily miss if you weren't paying attention, but once I noticed, I couldn't stop seeing it. The static in my headphones softened, fading into a strange silence that only made the tension worse. My breath caught in my throat as the camera began to pan, slowly shifting to the left. That's when I saw it. At first, I didn't even register what I was looking at. In the far corner of the room, barely visible in the flickering light, was a figure. It stood completely still, its body just a silhouette against the grime-covered wall. My stomach turned as I realized how unnaturally tall it was. The arms were too long, the posture rigid and unnatural, like something trying to imitate a human form, but not quite getting it right. Its face, if you could call it that, was blurred, like a smear on a lens. No features, no eyes, no mouth, just a vague, distorted shape that seemed to resist being seen. I paused the video, my hand shaking slightly as I stared at the frozen frame. I tried to tell myself it was just a creepy art project or some experimental film someone had uploaded to freak people out. That's all it was. But my gut told me otherwise. Still, I couldn't stop myself. Against every instinct screaming at me to close the video, I hit play. The camera kept panning, slowly revealing more of the room, but my eyes stayed locked on the figure in the corner. It didn't move, not an inch, but it felt like it was watching me. And then I saw something else. In the far corner of the screen, there was a window, its glass cracked and dirty. At first, it seemed like just another detail in the grimy, abandoned room. But as the light flickered, I caught a reflection in the glass. My heart skipped a beat. It was faint and distorted by the cracks, but it was unmistakable. My living room. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. It wasn't possible. I tried to tell myself I was imagining it, that it just looked similar. But the longer I stared, the more certain I became. The details were all there. My couch, my lamp, even the mug I'd left on the table an hour ago. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I told myself to stop the video, to delete it, to shut my laptop and never think about it again. But I couldn't move. It was like I was glued to my chair, my body frozen in place as the video kept playing. The camera began to zoom in on the figure. At first, nothing changed. It was still standing in the same spot, completely motionless. But as the camera got closer, I noticed something. Its head tilted slightly. It was so subtle I almost missed it. But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The figure was moving. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but it was moving. My stomach dropped. The static in my headphones returned, louder this time, mixed with that low hum that made my entire body tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone anymore. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker, like something unseen was pressing down on me. And then the screen went black. For a moment I sat there in the dark, staring at my own reflection in the monitor. My heart was racing, my hands gripping the edge of the desk so tightly my knuckles turned white. Just as I thought the video was over, a single word appeared on the screen in bright white text. "Look." Before I could process it, the video started again. But now, the room was empty. The figure was gone. I felt my chest tighten. My breaths came faster and shallower as I glanced around my apartment, half expecting to see the figure standing behind me. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of my laptop's fan, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was there, watching, waiting. I turned back to the screen. The video was still playing, but nothing was happening. The camera was slowly panning across the empty room as if searching for something or someone. Then, without warning, the figure reappeared. This time it was closer. It stood in the center of the room, its head still tilted, its featureless face aimed directly at the camera. My whole body tensed as I realized the camera wasn't zooming in anymore. The figure was moving toward it. The static in my headphones grew louder, and for a split second, I thought I heard something underneath it. A faint whisper, just barely audible. It was impossible to make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. It was angry. I couldn't take it anymore. I slammed my laptop shut, the screen going dark as the sound cut off abruptly. My heart was racing so fast I thought it might burst. My hands trembled as I sat there in the silence, trying to convince myself that it was just a video, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. That's when I heard it. A faint hum coming from somewhere behind me. I turned slowly, my pulse pounding in my ears, but the room was empty. At least I thought it was. After I watched the video, my life didn't feel the same. At first I thought it was just my imagination, the way the mind plays tricks on you after something creepy, but within a day things began happening that I couldn't explain, and the line between reality and paranoia started to blur. The first night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure from the video. Its blurred face, its unnaturally long limbs, the way it tilted its head as if it knew I was watching. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, convinced that I could feel it in the room with me. I shrugged it off as just a bad night and tried to go about my day. But things got worse. That morning, my phone was dead. It had been fully charged before I went to bed, but now it wouldn't turn on at all, no matter how long I left it plugged in. Annoyed, I reached for my laptop to look up solutions, but the moment I opened it, I froze. The video file was back. For you.mp4. I stared at it, my hands trembling. I knew I had deleted it. I'd emptied the trash, cleared the caches, done everything I could to wipe it from my system. Yet there it was, sitting on my desktop like it had never left. I deleted it again, this time running a virus scan to make sure nothing else was lurking. It took hours, but when the scan was done, the file was gone, or so I thought. That night, as I sat on my couch scrolling through TV channels, the lights in my apartment began to flicker. It wasn't a power surge. They dimmed and brightened in a slow, steady rhythm, almost as if someone was controlling them. And then I heard it. Static. It wasn't coming from the TV or any of my devices. It was just there, in the air around me, faint but unmistakable. At first I thought it was some kind of interference, maybe from a neighbor's equipment, but it didn't stop. Even when I turned off every device in my apartment, the static remained, buzzing faintly in my ears like it was alive. By the third night I was unraveling. Sleep was out of the question. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure standing in the corner of the room watching me. Shadows seemed to stretch and twist in the corners of my apartment, moving just out of the corner of my eye. The static grew louder. It followed me everywhere, creeping through my apartment like an invisible presence. I started leaving all the lights on, but even that didn't help. The shadows were still there, stretching and bending like they were alive. And the video, it wouldn't stay gone. No matter how many times I deleted it, it kept coming back. Sometimes it would reappear minutes later, as if mocking me. Other times, it would wait until I'd almost forgotten about it, only to show up at the worst possible moment. Once, I deleted it and emptied the trash, only to watch in horror as the file opened itself. The video played, but this time, it was different. The dimly lit room from before was gone, replaced by a black screen with a single line of text. "You've been chosen." My stomach dropped. I clicked frantically to shut the video off, but nothing happened. The text lingered on the screen, burned into my mind. Then the static surged in my headphones louder than ever, and the screen cut to black. I slammed the laptop shut and backed away, my breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. It was just a file, I told myself, just a stupid, creepy video. But deep down, I knew something was wrong, something I couldn't explain. I decided to wipe my laptop. I backed up all my important files to an external drive, performed a factory reset, and reinstalled everything from scratch. It took all night, but when it was done, the file was gone. Finally, I thought, it was over. But the next morning, I woke up to an email. There was no subject line, no sender, just an attachment. The file was named for you.mp4. My heart stopped. How was that possible? My laptop was completely wiped. There was no way the file should still exist. I stared at the email, my hands shaking, and noticed there was a single line of text beneath the attachment. "Do you see it yet?" I didn't know what to do. I felt like I was losing my mind. I deleted the email without opening it, but that didn't stop them. They kept coming. Every day, a new email. Always the same. No sender, no subject, just the file and a cryptic message. "It's closer than you think. You can't delete me. Do you hear it yet?" And I did. The static was everywhere now. It followed me from room to room, creeping into every corner of my apartment. Even when I left the house, it was there, faint but constant, buzzing in the back of my mind like a bad dream I couldn't wake up from. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. My days blurred together, each one more suffocating than the last. Every time I opened my laptop, the file was there, waiting for me. And the video had changed. One night, it started playing on its own. The dimly lit room was gone, replaced by a new scene, my living room. I froze, staring at the screen as the camera panned slowly across the space I was sitting in at that very moment. The couch, the lamp, the pile of clothes I'd left on the floor, it was all there, perfectly captured. And then the figure appeared. It stood in the middle of the room, its blurred face aimed directly at the camera. My heart raced as I realized it wasn't just in the video, it was here. I turned slowly, my entire body trembling, but the room was empty. At least that's what I told myself. The emails didn't stop, the static didn't stop, and the last message I received, "It's already inside." That night, I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I sat in the corner of my apartment, every light in the room blazing, clutching my phone like it would protect me. But deep down, I knew. There was nothing I could do. It wasn't just a video anymore. It was something else, something alive. And it wasn't going to stop until it got what it wanted. I didn't know where else to go or what else to do. The video had burrowed into my life, into my head, and I was unraveling by the minute. My days were a blur of static-filled silence and creeping paranoia. My nights were worse, filled with whispers I couldn't quite hear, and shadows that stretched and moved in ways they shouldn't. I felt like I was losing my mind, so I did the only thing I could think of. I went back to the forum where I found the video. Maybe someone there could tell me what was happening, or at least confirm that I wasn't alone in this nightmare. I scrolled through the threads, hoping to find something, anything that felt familiar. Most of the posts were garbage, people joking about red rooms, fake dark web experiences, or outright trolling. But then, buried deep in the thread list, I found it. Watch what shouldn't be seen. The original post was still there, exactly as I remembered it, a cryptic warning and a link to the cursed file. But the thread had grown since I last visited. There were hundreds of new replies, and as I skimmed through them, my stomach churned. Some people claimed to have watched the video and laughed it off as a hoax. Others weren't so lucky. A few posts described experiences eerily similar to mine, static sounds, strange shadows, things moving on their own. One reply stood out. "It's not just a video, it's a curse. Watching it is the first mistake. Trying to fight it is the second." That one hit me like a punch to the gut. I felt sick, my hands clammy as I kept scrolling. I posted my own story, typing out everything that had happened to me in as much detail as I could manage. My fingers shook as I hit submit. The first replies were exactly what I expected. People called me stupid, told me I deserved it for messing with the dark web. A few laughed, claiming they'd watched the same video and nothing had happened to them. Others were more serious, offering vague warnings to stop feeding it without explaining what that meant. And then I got a private message. The username was just a random jumble of numbers and letters with no posts or replies on their profile. The message was short. "You shouldn't have watched it." My heart skipped a beat. I typed back immediately, desperate for answers. "What is it? What's happening to me?" Their reply came almost instantly. "It's not a video, it's alive. Watching it invites it in. The more you engage, the stronger it gets." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What do you mean, engage?" I typed, but the message didn't go through. Their profile was gone, deleted like they had never existed. I stared at my screen, feeling helpless. If watching the video had invited it in, then what did that mean for me? What had I let into my life? After that, things started escalating. It wasn't just the video anymore. My apartment felt wrong. The air was heavy, like the room itself was pressing down on me. Little things would move when I wasn't looking. A book on my shelf shifted. My keys weren't where I left them. The closet door that I always kept shut was slightly ajar. And the whispers. God, the whispers. At first I convinced myself they were just in my head. Too many sleepless nights playing tricks on me. But they got louder, more distinct. They were coming from the corners of the room, from inside the walls, from everywhere. I couldn't take it anymore. I needed proof. I ordered security cameras and set them up in every corner of my apartment, one in the living room, one in the kitchen, and another in my bedroom. I told myself that if I could catch whatever was happening, I'd finally know what I was dealing with. The first night, the cameras recorded hours of footage. I woke up, bleary-eyed and exhausted, and immediately reviewed the files. At first, everything seemed normal. I watched myself toss and turn in bed, walk to the kitchen for water, and sit on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. But then, around 3 a.m., the screen glitched. For less than a second, the footage distorted, and when it cleared, there was a figure standing in the corner of the living room. It was blurry, just like in the video, but I knew it was the same thing. My heart pounded as I rewound the footage, playing it back frame by frame. But when I paused on the figure, it wasn't there anymore. The second night was worse. I woke up drenched in sweat, feeling like someone was in the room with me. When I reviewed the footage, the cameras glitched again, this time in the bedroom. The figure was there, standing at the foot of my bed. My hands shook as I fast-forwarded through the recording. The figure didn't move, it just stood there watching me sleep for hours. By the third night, the files were completely corrupted. The recordings wouldn't play, and when I tried to open them, all I got was static. I was falling apart. The whispers were louder now, constant, a low murmur that never stopped. The static seemed to follow me everywhere. My reflection in the bathroom mirror didn't quite move in sync with me anymore, and I started to feel like I was being watched all the time, And then I got another message. It came through the forum from another anonymous profile. The subject line was blank, but the message was clear. "The Watcher is already inside." My stomach twisted. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. I turned in my chair, looking around the room, but nothing seemed out of place. And then I felt it. The air shifted, growing colder. A faint creak came from the floorboards behind me, followed by the soft sound of something breathing. I didn't want to turn around. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to stay still, to keep my eyes forward, but I couldn't help it. Slowly, trembling, I turned in my chair. At first, I didn't see anything. The room looked exactly as it always did, messy, dimly lit, empty. But the closet door was open. I always kept it closed. And standing in the shadows, barely visible in the faint light from my desk lamp, was the figure. It didn't move, it didn't speak, it just stood there, its head tilted at that unnatural angle, its blurred face somehow fixed on me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I don't remember what happened next. Maybe I screamed. Maybe I ran. All I know is that when I woke up, it was morning, and I was lying on the floor in my living room. The static was gone. The whispers were gone. But I knew it wasn't over. It was just waiting, watching, always watching. That night was the one that broke me. I had spent the entire evening sitting in silence, too afraid to turn on the TV, too exhausted to think. Every noise in my apartment made me flinch, the hum of the fridge, the occasional creak of the floorboards. It all felt alive, like the walls were breathing, like the shadows in the corners of the room were waiting. Eventually, I dragged myself to bed, though I knew I wouldn't sleep. The static had become a constant companion now, faint but ever-present, like it was burrowed into my skull. But somehow, at some point, I drifted off. I woke up to a sound I'll never forget. It wasn't loud, just a faint creak like weight pressing down on the floorboards. My eyes flew open, and for a moment, I lay frozen in bed, staring at the ceiling, barely breathing. And then I saw it. My computer was on. The screen's pale glow lit up the room, casting long, flickering shadows across the walls. The video had started playing again. Static hissed through the speakers, louder than usual, the screen flashing as the camera panned across the familiar, dimly lit room. I didn't move. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst. I tried to tell myself it wasn't real, that I was dreaming, but the air in the room was too heavy, too cold. The camera kept panning, slowly, and then it stopped. The figure was back. It stood in the center of the room, just as before. Its head tilted at that unnatural angle, its blurred face pointed straight at the camera. Then, something changed. The figure moved. It wasn't like a normal person shifting their weight or stepping forward. It was wrong, jerky, stuttering, like a glitch. One moment it was standing in the middle of the room, and then it was closer, and then closer still. My stomach twisted as I realized the camera wasn't just showing a room anymore. It was showing my room, the bed, the desk, the chair. Everything on the screen was identical to the space I was sitting in, and the figure wasn't just in the video anymore. I heard the floor creak again, this time closer. Slowly, I turned my head toward the corner of the room, and there it was. It was blurry, distorted, just like in the video. But it was there, standing, watching. I don't remember deciding to move. 1 second I was frozen in bed, and the next I was scrambling toward my desk. I grabbed the first thing I could, a water glass, and threw it at the figure. It shattered against the wall behind it, passing right through the thing like it wasn't even there. But the figure turned its head. That slow, deliberate tilt sent chills down my spine. It wasn't just watching me, it was acknowledging me. I panicked. I slammed my laptop shut, hoping, praying that cutting off the video would make it stop. But when I turned around again, the figure was closer. It didn't move like a person. It jerked forward, as if it was skipping through frames in a broken film. I bolted for the door. My fingers fumbled with the lock, trembling so badly that I thought I'd never get it open. But somehow I managed, and I sprinted into the hallway without looking back. The static followed me. I flew down the stairs and burst out onto the street, the cold night air hitting me like a slap to the face. My car was parked a block away, and I ran for it, heart pounding, lungs burning. When I finally reached it, I jumped inside and locked the doors, shaking so badly I could barely get the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life, but the moment I turned on the car, the static surged. It wasn't coming from the radio. I'd turned that off. It wasn't coming from my phone either. It was just there, filling the car, pressing into my ears, vibrating through my chest. I floored the gas, desperate to put as much distance between myself and that apartment as I could. The streetlights flickered as I drove under them, their glow pulsing in time with the hum of the static. I glanced at my phone in the cup holder. It had been dead for days, but now it was lighting up, buzzing incessantly with notifications I couldn't read. And then the whispers started. They were faint at first, buried under the static, but they grew louder as I drove. Dozens of voices overlapping, speaking in a language I couldn't understand. It was like they were coming from inside my head, drilling into my brain. I glanced in the rearview mirror, and my blood ran cold. The figure was in the back seat. It sat perfectly still, its head tilted just like before, its blurred face aimed straight at me. My hands tightened on the wheel, my knuckles white, and I slammed on the brakes. The car screeched to a halt, throwing me forward against the seatbelt. I turned around, heart racing, but the back seat was empty. I sat there in the middle of the empty street, gripping the wheel so tightly my hands ached, trying to convince myself that I hadn't seen what I knew I had. But the static didn't stop. It was in the air, in my head, in the hum of the streetlights. No matter where I went, it was there, following me. I don't know how long I drove. Hours, maybe. I passed through towns I didn't recognize, gas stations that looked abandoned, stretches of road that felt endless. I wasn't heading anywhere. I just wanted to run. But you can't outrun something that's already inside you. Eventually, I pulled off onto the shoulder of some forgotten highway and killed the engine. The silence was deafening, but the static remained, faint and persistent, like it was mocking me. I sat there in the dark, gripping the wheel, waiting for something to happen, but nothing did. The static hasn't stopped, the whispers haven't stopped, and every time I close my eyes, I see it, standing there, waiting, watching. I've abandoned everything, my apartment, my laptop, my phone, even my car. I thought maybe if I left it all behind, I could escape. But deep down, I know the truth. It isn't tied to the video, or the laptop, or the apartment. It's tied to me, and it's waiting. I thought running would save me. I packed what little I could carry, left my car on the side of a highway, and hopped on a bus to nowhere. No phone, no laptop, no ties to my old life. I didn't tell anyone where I was going because I didn't know myself. I just wanted to be somewhere new, somewhere this thing couldn't find me. For a while, it almost worked. I found a cheap motel on the edge of a run-down town. The room smelled like mildew, the faucet dripped endlessly, and the TV didn't work. But it was quiet. There was no static, no whispers. The shadows stayed in the corners where they belonged. For 3 days, I avoided anything with a screen. I used cash, kept to myself, and barely left the room. Each morning, I told myself that maybe, just maybe, it was over. But on the 3rd night, it came back. I'd bought a prepaid phone for emergencies, still wrapped in its packaging. I hadn't even turned it on yet. But as I sat in the dim motel room, staring at the peeling wallpaper, I heard a buzz. My blood ran cold. I looked at the phone. The screen was glowing, even though I hadn't activated it. A notification flashed. An email with no subject line, no sender, just an attachment. My hands trembled as I picked it up, knowing full well what I'd find. The file was there, foryou.mp4. I dropped the phone like it was a live grenade. It hit the floor with a hollow thud and started playing on its own. The same room, the same flickering light, the same figure standing motionless in the corner. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. My legs felt like lead, my body frozen in place as I watched the video from across the room. The figure didn't move, but its presence filled the space like a suffocating weight. I ripped the battery out of the phone and threw it in the trash. I thought that would be the end of it, but the damage was already done. That night, the static came back. It didn't stop with the phone. Over the next few days, the curse seemed to infect everything around me. It started with mirrors. Whenever I caught my reflection, something felt off. It moved with me, but not quite in sync, just a fraction of a second behind, like a bad echo. At first, I convinced myself it was my imagination, but then I started seeing things. Shadows. They weren't always there, but sometimes, when I wasn't paying attention, I'd catch a glimpse of a figure standing just behind me. By the time I turned around, it would be gone. Photos were next. I kept a few old pictures in my wallet, family, friends, memories of better times. But the shadows crept into those too. A blurry figure appeared in the background of every photo, its distorted outline barely visible, like it had always been there. I stopped looking in mirrors. I threw the photos away. None of it helped. No matter where I went, it found me. I tried to keep to myself, to stay invisible. I spent most days wandering aimlessly, avoiding crowds and anything that might remind me of what I'd left behind. But one night, I stopped at a diner on the outskirts of town. I hadn't eaten in days, and the faint glow of the neon open sign felt like a small comfort. The place was nearly empty. Just me, a waitress wiping down tables, and a man sitting a few booths over. He looked worse than I felt. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled and stained, and his eyes were bloodshot, sunken, like he hadn't slept in weeks. At first I didn't pay him much attention, but then he looked up. Our eyes met, and I felt something shift. He stood and walked over to my booth, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. His hands were shaking as he set his coffee cup down, his voice barely above a whisper. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he said. My stomach tightened. "What are you talking about?" "The video," he said. "The one that doesn't leave you alone." I froze. My breath caught in my throat, and I felt my pulse pounding in my ears. "How do you know about that?" "I watched it," he said, his voice hollow. "A long time ago. I thought I was the only one." "What is it?" I asked, leaning closer. "What's happening to me?" He shook his head, his eyes darting around the room, like he was afraid someone might overhear us. "It's not just a video," he said. "It's something else. Watching it doesn't just haunt you. It changes you. Changes me. It doesn't stop," he said. "Not until it takes you." "Takes me where?" I whispered. He didn't answer. His hands clenched into fists, his gaze fixed on something just over my shoulder. I turned instinctively, but there was nothing there. "I shouldn't have talked to you," he muttered, standing abruptly. "It'll make it worse, for both of us." Before I could say another word, he was gone. That encounter didn't bring clarity, it brought dread. The static was louder now, constant, like it had wormed its way into the fabric of my existence. Even in moments of silence, I could feel it. A low hum vibrating under my skin. The shadows weren't just in mirrors anymore. I saw them everywhere, in windows, in photographs, in the reflections of puddles on the street. One night, I glanced at a store window as I passed by. My reflection was there, but it wasn't me. It stood still, its head tilted at that awful angle, staring back at me with blurred, featureless emptiness. I ran. I've tried to keep moving, but no matter where I go, it follows. It's in the flicker of a streetlight, in the hum of an engine, in the corner of my vision where I can't quite focus. I don't think it's waiting anymore. It's getting closer. I woke up to the sound of my laptop powering on. I hadn't touched it in weeks. I hadn't even unpacked it since I fled my old apartment. It had been buried at the bottom of my bag, untouched, lifeless, or so I thought. But now, it sat on the motel's rickety desk, the screen glowing faintly in the darkness. Then came the ping. It was an email, no subject line, no sender, just a single attachment. I didn't want to open it. Every cell in my body screamed at me to walk away, to run again, to throw the damn thing into the motel dumpster and never look back. But instead, my hands moved on their own, trembling as they gripped the trackpad. I clicked. The attachment opened and my stomach dropped. It wasn't a video this time, it was a single image. The same dimly lit room from the video, the same cracked walls, the same flickering bulb casting jagged shadows across the floor. But the figure in the middle of the room, it wasn't blurry anymore. Its face was clear. It was me. I stared at the screen, my breath caught in my throat. The figure wasn't just some vague likeness or distorted version of me. It was exactly me. My face, my hair, my clothes, my hollow sunken eyes, even the scar on my cheek I'd gotten as a kid. It stood in the room, its head tilted at that sickening, unnatural angle, staring directly at the camera. Staring directly at me. I slammed the laptop shut, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might stop. I couldn't get the image out of my head. It wasn't just a face, it wasn't just a resemblance, it was me. And I knew in that moment what it meant. It wasn't haunting me anymore, it was becoming me. Or I was becoming it. The static started again, louder and sharper than it had ever been before. It wasn't just in my ears, it was in the walls, in the floor, in the air itself. I grabbed my bag and stumbled out of the motel room into the cold night air. The streetlights buzzed faintly above me, flickering in and out of sync, casting shadows that didn't match their surroundings. The static followed me. I walked aimlessly through the empty streets, gripping the strap of my bag so tightly that my knuckles turned white. My pulse thundered in my ears, louder even than the whispers that had started to creep back in. The whispers weren't faint anymore. They were louder, clearer, overlapping voices speaking in words I couldn't understand but somehow knew were meant for me. Everywhere I looked, I saw reflections, in windows, in puddles on the pavement, in the shine of a passing car. And in every reflection, the figure was there, standing behind me. Sometimes it was blurred, other times it was crystal clear, but it was always there, always watching. I couldn't take it anymore. I sat down on a bench in the middle of an empty park, clutching my head, trying to drown out the whispers and the static and the pounding of my own thoughts. That's when I realized I wasn't alone. I looked up and saw it, standing at the edge of the park, just beyond the reach of the streetlights. It wasn't blurry anymore, it wasn't hiding in shadows or lurking at the edges of my vision, it was me. I don't know how long I sat there staring at it. It didn't move. It didn't make a sound. But I could feel it, its presence, its weight pressing down on me, filling the air, suffocating me. Eventually, I opened the laptop again. The screen lit up instantly, the email still open, the image still there. My own face stared back at me, distorted slightly by the flickering light in the room. Beneath the image was a single line of text. "You're ready." I don't know what it meant, but I could feel the truth of it settling into my bones. The static grew louder, the whispers rising into a deafening crescendo. The air around me felt thick, electric, pulsing with something I couldn't describe. And then everything went quiet. Too quiet. I looked up again, but the figure was gone. Or maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was closer now. Maybe it was already inside me. I don't know how this ends, I don't know what's waiting for me or when it'll happen, but I know it's coming, and when it does, there'll be no escape. If you've stayed with me this long, I need to ask you something. Would you have clicked the link? Would you have watched the video knowing it might follow you forever? Or would you have walked away, kept your curiosity in check, and let the mystery remain a mystery? Curiosity is funny like that, isn't it? It whispers in your ear, tempts you with questions you can't resist answering.